Okay, hi, and we are live. Yay! And I've got helicopter zombie Jim Krut with us, and this is Zombiepalooza Radio Live. Thank you to Jeffrey Kosh for this amazing backdrop, and we're going to get right into it because I've been waiting for a while to be able to have this man on. All right, so give us a little bit of background about you for those who may not know about your uh, zombie apocalyptic background.
Oh, okay. Well, my name is Jim Krut. I live near Gettysburg, Pennsylvania at the moment. And some years ago, when I was living in Pittsburgh, George Romero was making a film called Dawn of the Dead. That was back in around 1970s. And in 1978, it came out. And I appeared in the movie as the helicopter zombie, in which I, as a zombie, walk under the rotating blades of a helicopter and lose the top of my head to cinematic history.
Bad idea. All right, so if you would like to, let's talk about that epic scene where that happened, because as far as I know, I think you're the only person that has had that happen to you as a zombie, unless someone has done a tribute to you, which I'm sure there's probably something out there that I may not be aware of. Talk to us about that scene, if you would.
Well, the way I got the role was through Tom Savini. I didn't audition for it. Tom Savini I knew because he and Tom, by the way, did all the makeup and special effects for Dawn of the Dead, and is pretty well known now for his Douglas School of Effects and Makeup. And if you've ever seen the program Face Off, where people compete, a lot of his students are the finalists. So he's still rolling, making movies. But Tom and I happened to be in college together back in the 1960s, and we managed to stay in touch in Pittsburgh. And I returned to Pittsburgh after 3 years in the military, and was on my way to Texas. I never made it to Texas, never made it back to Texas. I ended up staying in Pittsburgh for 7 years, which I'm glad. A lot of good things happened, including filmmaking, getting married, all that other good stuff. So anyway, Tom said, Jim, I've got this role for you. And while we were in college, Tom and I both worked in theater.
All right, hang on. I'm on your I'm on a site and it pulled up. Sorry about that. Go ahead. My apologies.
Right. Well, while we were in college, Tom and I both worked in theater. Not necessarily as a study, because the Point Park University, where we went, owned the Pittsburgh Playhouse, and they had a theatrical program there, and there were full-time theater students. We were just very interested in doing theater, and so we formed an alternative theater company with several other folks, and did a number of pieces together. So anyway, our history goes back a number of years, back into the 60s, and then pops up into the 1970s, and Tom's back in Pittsburgh. He was in the military, and I was out of it, and we were able to reconnect. So he said, I've got this great role for you. You might remember George Romero. And I said, George who? He said, remember Night of the Living Dead? He said, oh yeah, well, everybody knows Night of the Living Dead. Well, he said, well, George directed that, of course. And that was about 10 years earlier, and it still sort of stood out there as a very unique film. It was black and white. It was groundbreaking in many ways and horrific. And you had to wonder, if you worked in a film somebody like that made, would you ever work again? Would somebody hire you for something else?
It was definitely different, because it not only brought in something that was completely new to American television or American film, but it also talked about some really, well, not specifically talk about, but it had some amazingly poignant social issues and the structure of how it was put together. So yeah.
Yeah, it was revolutionary at the time, but it also featured a lot of gore, and people couldn't get past some of that. But it definitely had an impact. So
Mhm.
looking back on it today, people said, "Oh man, you were just so lucky," you know. And of course, I'm lucky. I was. Everybody who was involved with it was lucky. You don't know that so much at the time. You just wonder whether you'll ever work again if you do this film.
Right. Um, I would like to take a few minutes to talk about George Romero, if you wouldn't mind, and what the impact of his film background meant to you, and many of the people that you know that were in indie film.
A number of the people in Dawn of the Dead, for example, were also other people who worked in theater in Pittsburgh. I was working in theater, and it was amazing because my time on the set was at the Monroeville Airport. I didn't have a chance really to see any of the other scenes as they were being shot. So when the film came out, I was able to, oh, I know him. I know that. I know her. We worked together. She never said anything about it. You know? So it was kind of amazing to see a lot of people that I knew appear in the film at that point. Because a lot of the folks were local, and we had worked together in a variety of productions, or we'd gone to see each other's shows and such. As far as George, what he brought to it was a unique vision, and as you mentioned, Jackie, the sort of the social aspect, the introspective look at society. You know, who are we, and do we go along on a day-to-day basis, and we kind of bump along, and it takes somebody like George Romero to sort of throw everything up in our face in a different light, to cast our view of life into a little different vision. And George was able to do that both subtly and with humor and visually. I don't think there's anybody that I can quite compare him to, because it wasn't just a one-off film. He kept that thread of humanity, humor, innovation, social commentary going throughout his films. Some people are not as thrilled about some of his later ones as they were with the earlier ones. And if you look at any musician, most musicians, when they succeed, it's because the first things they do and people gravitate toward them. And when they branch out or try something new, they pick up new people, or they may lose some people. It's that way with filmmakers as well.
So after you did your role in Dawn of the Dead, what was your idea about indie film, and how did it transform you?
It's interesting because it was the first film I was involved with. I mean, I'd done a lot of theater, but it was the first film I'd been involved with, and I was working on a day-to-day basis, a traveling repertory company. We traveled everywhere from Chicago to North Carolina to Boston to Edinburgh, Scotland in performance. And so I didn't have really a chance to think that much. We had 7 plays in repertory, and at any given time, we could pull one out of our hats and do that play. So that was a lot of memorization, a lot of character development. We did have, as a result of that, however, radio plays that we worked on. We had some television appearances, like on Bill Moyer's Invention series. So we did a lot, but in terms of film, it was in a sense a one-off. And it wasn't until maybe the year 2000 when I went and did an audition for a film that was being shot in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, about 50 miles from where I live. And it was the Guatemalan handshake. And I thought, don't know anything about it, but might as well give it a shot. I went in for the audition, and before they got my paperwork, they called me in and we talked a little bit, and they said, oh, that's great. That's great. We've got this role for you. We'd love to have you do this thing. We've got a great thing for you. And then the director called me back later and he said, I didn't know you were the helicopter zombie. I just got your paperwork. I said, well, good. You know, I mean, that's what you want to hear, that it's not based on what you've done, but what you can do.
All right. So I've had a number of people who have come on with theater background. And what I would like to do is have you give us some perspective on what it is like to be able to come from that kind of a background and then go into a totally different venue of doing film.
When I was in Oklahoma, there was on a hillside. This is just a sample, and so thousands of people are below in the valley, and the actors are being spotlighted, and they say, "Hello, I have risen. You know, things are great, and we should go there." Well, those are very broad movements, obviously, which you do when you have to signal somebody far away. In theater, if you have a smaller group, you bring that down. If you're on camera and your whole face suddenly fills the screen, every little movement is exaggerated. So if you do some of those kinds of movements, it's just like crazy, and the viewer's eyes have a hard time adjusting to it. So you really have to tone everything down, bring it back to less is more. There's definitely a difference. Plus, in theater, maybe it's a play that's 2 hours long or an hour long or an hour and a half, whatever it may be, and you have to know that intimately and everybody else's lines, and you have to consistently do them. And if somebody forgets a line, you have to help pick them up. And if it's you hope somebody can help pick you up and keep the thing moving, and that people will just see it as seamless. In filmmaking, obviously, it's cut. Let's do it again. Do it again.
Yeah, you get to do a do-over, but when it's theater, it's live, and you are out there, and it's like, okay, if something doesn't move the way that it's supposed to, or the lighting doesn't look right, or if somebody moved something to a place where it shouldn't be, and you end up tripping over it, or making a spectacle of yourself, it's very, very difficult to undo that. You really
exactly can't. That's exactly right. So, but it is a transition, and it is an adjustment process. But in theater, you have to pump out everything you have on an ongoing basis for that time. You are pumped, you are moving, you're going. And when you're working on film, and even if you have one line like, "Who walked out the door?" Okay, "Who walked out the door?" Well, you can do that 13 different ways, but try to do it consistently and get that energy out there each and every time. And you think, "Wow, that was terrific." And the director says, "That was great. Let's shoot it again." Okay, now let's try it from this angle. And you think, "This is the most boring line I've ever had to say in my entire life. I wish we could move past this and get on to the next scene where something's happening. There's real action."
All right, so now I gotta go, and I gotta ask you, how many takes did it take to get your head chopped off as a zombie?
One take. We did have a backup set of clothing, makeup, and everything was geared to go another time if we needed to. But I put that down really as a tribute to Tom Savini and the preparation that went into the head casting and everything that had to be done in order to get the prosthetics together, get the timing together. And a lot of people ask what it was like working with George Romero. And actually, my time on the scene, George was there. He did some direction, no question about it. But the scene itself was pretty much under the control of Tom Savini.
Yes.
Because it was a matter of timing. And you had to have somebody going off camera, pulling the top of my head off with monofilament line. At the very same time, I'm reacting to that. And then the guys behind the boxes that I'm standing on with these hand blood pumps, pumping the blood up so that at that same time the head comes off, the blood comes out, reaction is up, and I tumbled down. So it's a matter of, you know, I know it's going to happen, and it has to happen this way. It's hard to explain that sometimes if you've been working on it in your mind for a couple of weeks. So George would say, Tom, you know, go ahead, do it. Here's the camera angle, you know, whatever we need to do. And Tom was one of the guys behind the boxes. So that's how we got by with doing it one time, fortunately, and it was great.
How high up off the ground were you, or did you have to do anything, you know, at ground level to raise you up to be able to get to that point, or was it low enough to be able to? I mean, I'm only 5'2", okay, so I got to stand on everything to be able to reach something. What was it like for you to be able to do that particular scene? Was it awkward, or did you just have to walk and boom, there you go?
There was some awkwardness to it. As I mentioned earlier, I was in the military. I was in Vietnam, so I was around a lot of helicopters. And I'm 6'4", so every time I get near a helicopter, I am ducking down. In this particular scene, my zombie character walks not just toward the helicopter, but climbs up on boxes as an obstacle, getting to, you know, Roger, who's filling, you know, the fuel tank in the helicopter. And so when I managed to climb up on the boxes, the focus is straight ahead. The boxes are kind of really jumbled to make it look like a loose assortment. I actually did fall down on them. There was a stumble. But when I managed to straighten up, bam, everything hit. So
let me ask you a question that I don't know if you've ever been asked something like that. There's been a lot of focus lately on safety precautions and making sure that the actors are well taken care of, you know, hydrated and all of that kind of stuff the way they need to. But the stunts that they do, and really part of what I see you doing as doing that part is there is stunt work involved. You have to have a pretty good sense of your body structure and how things go as far as angles, like we were talking about. Was there someone on the set that was making sure that everybody for this particular film was safe and in what they were doing?
Well, I can only, you know, comment really on the scenes where I was, but I do know from tales where Tom Savini falls from a second floor balcony, misses some of the mattresses or boxes that he's supposed to land on,
right?
Does it again. And does it hurt? Yeah, it does. Do things go wrong? There was a sheet of glass that Tom is supposed to drive through in a motorcycle. Well, the glass is, let's say, like a sugar water kind of composition, but it's big, so they had to make it a little thicker. And he nearly crunched his head going through that because it was a lot thicker than expected. So again, this was filmmaking without, let's use formula number 4 for this and special effect number 3 for that. A lot of these things were being done for the first time. So as a result, the process had to be created and crafted, and it hadn't been scientifically tested necessarily. There was just a certain amount of faith that things would work pretty well. Fortunately, for the most part, they did. Did people get injured? Yeah, some people got injured. Yeah.
Right. I want to really thank you from the bottom of my heart when it comes to allowing yourself to be a part of that particular project and other indie projects that you are a part of, because you inspire people to be able to try things that maybe they wouldn't necessarily do, not to say that they would be dangerous or anything, but to get into the indie background and be able to express themselves in ways that they're comfortable with. I'd like to talk to you about the importance of indie as far as having people being able to feel like they finally fit in. A lot of times they're on the outside looking in, and when they get part of a project and they're with people that understand and really enjoy what they're doing, how important that is for self-esteem and for
Well, I think you've kind of hit that right on the head, Jackie. The idea that your thoughts or your actions or the way you dress or your personality just doesn't seem to fit in with parts of society in general. Sometimes you move to another town and you're perfectly fitting in. But most people, if they go to an audition for a film, they could be prepared mentally, physically, emotionally, and they could look like they're great for the part. But they don't know what's in the director's mind. And if the director has something else in mind, no matter how good you are or what your skills are, you're not going to get that part. And that can be very hard on you emotionally. You think, I'm rejected. Ah. Well, you get over it and you pick yourself up and you keep on going, because you realize if you were directing, you would want to get the person who most fits your vision of what that role is. And maybe you bring something to it that, boy, that would be great, but in another context. But this other person brings, maybe they're an acrobat. Who knows what they bring to it? And they can do flips and falls and everything else as well. Or maybe they can juggle. Now, you can learn skills to be, adapt to a role, but in independent filmmaking, usually it's a guy who says, or a gal who says, I've got this idea for a film. And they pull together a lot of their friends and people who either buy into it or have a similar interest. And then they bring in some other people. And gee, if they make a film and actually get it done, that's incredible. Maybe 100 people say, I'm going to make a movie. And maybe actually 10 of them actually physically start the process and make it happen. And that
talk a little bit more about that, if you would, please.
Sure. It takes money, it takes talent, and it takes time. And you pull out one of the ingredients and something's going to not contribute to success, as it were. It can be very difficult. You have to sort of, as an independent filmmaker, you're going to be begging people to work with you and understand your vision and help you to complete it. On my website, I have a little film that runs about 20 minutes. It's called Valoo. And the director, Matt Leslie, had called me, and I'd done another short with him once before. It was a spoof of a Walking Dead 30th season non-renewal. And we had a great time with it. So he said, hey, look, I'm going to work on this other short film, and I think we could probably get it done in a weekend. I said, okay. We worked on it maybe 3 months. Why do things take 3 months? Well, we have this warehouse, but oh man, God, they're working this weekend and we can't use that space that we were going to use. And oh, so-and-so can't make it. This happened. We've got the cameras. Now, the only problem is it's going to be 90 degrees outside, so probably close to 100 inside, but we'll have a lot of water. Okay, so you get paid in water. That's fine. And you try to stay alive during that process.
We will help you try to not kill yourself, but and hopefully it'll work the right way, but who knows? Let's make a movie.
Another funny part about that one was Matt said, okay, these guys are like sophisticated bank robbers, they're dressed up in suits, so just get an old suit that you have. It's going to be like a one weekend shoot, so just any old suit out of the closet. Well, I got one that didn't really fit. It was getting a little tight. You know how things shrink when they get in the closet after a while. And I don't know why.
Either.
And during one of the scenes, the pants split right down the back. So Of course, it was a going away scene, and so we, do a little clip, move the camera up a little bit till we get past that. And are we done with that? Well, I think we're going to have to do that thing. We're going to have to work. Okay, all right. I'll get my wife and see if she can help sew that, add a patch in there, and we'll use some duct tape and try to get that thing fixed for tomorrow's shoot. Okay, so we do that. Bam, that splits right again because of the action and the movement. Okay. Will people see it? We don't know. We don't know. But things like that happen. But, you lose probably 5 pounds in a day because you're perspiring, but you're performing and you're working with other people and they're enjoying what they're doing, and you're bonding. And hopefully, in the director's vision, he takes all of these pieces, pulls out the best of them, and creates a great product. This is obviously a very low budget, this 20-minute piece I'm talking about, but as an example how independent filmmaking works. A bigger budget might have meant bigger things. Maybe the power in the place would not have gone out. We wouldn't have had to say there's a storm, the power went out.
And did you have permission?
Oh yeah, we had
where
permission. We had permission. But a lot of time. It's like when we're working on Dawn of the Dead, the only time frame they had to work was when the mall closed, whether it was like 9 or 10 o'clock at night, until the mall opened again in the morning. During that time, that's when the film could be made in the mall for Dawn of the Dead, and all the blood had to be cleaned up, the broken glass, tire tracks, costume pieces, bits of sandwiches left on the floor. All of that stuff had to be cleaned up and made look like it never happened, day after day after day.
How long did that? I'm getting an echo in here. How long did that actually take to do?
In the mall, none of my stuff was in the mall. When my ship came in, I was at the airport, so my stuff was done over about a 2-day period.
Getting it out.
Yeah.
All right. Let me see here. All right. I know that you have 3 indie projects that I want to talk about that you're either working on that are coming out either this year or next year. So let's get to that. And I'm going to go over and get my notes. And hopefully we won't have any more commercials popping up or anything like that going on there. Talk about Darkness Waits.
Darkness Waits. Libby McDermott, who directed a film called Dead Woman's Hollow a couple years ago. It was based on 2 women hiking the Appalachian Trail, and they were attacked and shot at by a man. One of the women was killed. So she did a film based on that incident. And Darkness Waits is actually a sequel, a follow-up to that original film that she made. So it's not necessarily based on that story, but some of the same characters are involved. I was not involved in the Dead Woman's Hollow, but I was very delighted to work with Libby, both as an independent filmmaker and just as a very genuine person who has a lot of vision and talent. And that's the other thing about independent filmmaking. I think that's where all the ideas come from. When people want to realize a vision rather than, I've got to make money with this, and the producers say I have to do it that way. There are big blockbuster Hollywood films, and some of them aren't worth seeing. There are independent films which are so thoughtful, so carefully crafted, so lovingly put together. And there's a unity that sometimes builds in the cast that comes through on screen too. And the relationships, I think, come through so much stronger. So that's why I love supporting independent films and working in them.
Let's see. When do you know when that might actually come out?
They're still doing some shooting on it. I'm hoping by next year, because the process has gone on roughly 2 years now at this point, which is a long time for filmmaking. But when you realize a lot of it is outdoors, and you only have certain windows of opportunity when the leaves are on the trees, and you need to recapture that same time when the leaves are on the trees, or the leaves have changed color, and you need to go back to some of the same areas and reshoot them. It may take a year. You need to do other things in the meantime. Again,
Right.
a different budget would have made a difference there too.
Can you talk a little bit about the importance of continuity? We talked a little bit about the suit and the split and all of that other kind of thing. Talk a little bit more about continuity as far as low budget film, and what some of these indie people can do to be able to spice up and make it a little bit more fluid.
Really, you almost need somebody with an eye and attention to detail. And yet, I know there was a scene we were working on with a Host of Sparrows, the one we just finished up in June. And it's in the editing process now. So there are maybe 6 of us sitting around a table, and we're passing things around. And between scenes or changes of camera angles, you think, did I pass that salt shaker with my left hand or my right hand? Did I take a piece of the chicken? Did I cut into it in that one? Because now we have to redo that chicken scene. Sometimes you have 6 people remembering the same thing just a little differently.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It can be very difficult. So it was kind of funny. The director wrote, we have a separate private Facebook page for the cast and crew to communicate. And in the editing process, he wrote, "Oh, wow," he said, "sometimes when you pick something up with your right hand, you should not set it down with your left." If it's still in your right hand. So,
not naming names here.
No names mentioned. These things will happen. I was filming Deadlands 2, Trapped, a few years ago, and we were in a conference room. We realized after about 4 takes, there was a clock on the wall at the end of the conference table. And the clock had been, kept moving in the course of things. The director said, "I don't think we can go back and fix that. I don't think anybody will really notice, maybe." Because it wasn't one of the things that everybody was focused on. We're focusing on lines and the immediate things in front. So if there's a picture on the wall and somebody changes the picture, you might not notice. The continuity is and actually I should say the lack of continuity will jump out to people viewing it more so than it will to the people immediately involved, because they are so absorbed in what they're doing.
Right. When they've got the mindset of trying to take care of their lines, trying to make sure they're in the correct position, trying to make sure that they don't screw up, trying to make sure that they are doing the exact same thing take after take after take, it can get really mind-boggling. And I won't go into exactly how I know that, but I have a little bit of film experience, tiny bit, with another project going on. And it's interesting to be able to watch other people and how they can just go to it, and they do the same inflection and they do the same movements and all of that. And I'm wondering how long exactly it took them to do something like that.
It can be take after take after take. Yeah. It can be 14 takes, 15, 20 takes. It depends, because your line could be perfect, but maybe the light behind you was not. Maybe there's an extension cord that shouldn't be there showing in the corner of the frame. So it's not necessarily because of what you're doing. Or now it started to rain outside and the light has completely changed. Or a cloud came over the sun, whatever it happens. So there are many reasons why you have to shoot and reshoot. But trying to maintain that consistency, that's why, gee, I look at the script and say, this isn't going to take too long, you know, for this. Oh yeah, yeah.
You'll be there for hours.
By the time you get to the master, the action, the reaction, maybe some cut-ins and a few other things thrown in there, it takes a while. It takes a while to get it right. And it all depends on the director's eye.
You gave me a 43-second teaser about a film that you're going to be in called Bottom Creek. Talk about Bottom Creek.
Well, it's it's kind of funny if you've seen the teaser. Essentially,
yes, I did.
Me in a kayak going down, doing a little fishing and catching something there toward the end of it.
Some.
That is a second film with Todd Chamberlain, we were going to shoot another film last year, and the budget did not come through for it. Financing did not come through for it. So he said, I do want to keep everybody on track, and I do have this other script I'd like to work on and keep everybody working, and keep all the equipment, you know, in movement, in motion. So he said, I've got this film called Bottom Creek. And I said, well, that's great, but you know, I'm shooting in May every weekend through the week. I've got other shots into June, and then I have a knee surgery, and I'll be laid up maybe for a couple months. He said, oh, he said, if I can, he said, we're not really going to be starting until later in June after you have your surgery, but if we started shooting before that, could I get you in? And I said, yes. Can we do one day? Can we do it in a day? He said, yeah, we can do it in a day. We'll do it in a day. He said, I just want to get you in this. I said, okay. So he got the whole crew together, and they assembled on a day that was not going to be one of the scheduled shooting days, and did this opening sequence with me in it. And I was mentioning Libby, who did the other film, and as we got to the creek or the riverbank, I see a drone, and Libby and her now newly married husband, Matt, her film partner, they're operating the drone. So these folks are working together and cooperating, and that's what you really like to see in independent filmmaking too, shared resources. So the drone work, I think, worked very well, and they did their part, and then they were gone. So if you can bring in friends, you can bring in people who have the resources and equipment. Beyond that opening sequence, I can't tell you a lot because.
Oh yeah. No, because I want people to be able to see it, you know, fresh and all that. I just have. I'm getting the echo back again. I just have one question for you. On the links that you actually gave me, am I going to be able to put up any of that stuff for people to peruse, or should I not do that?
I think you can share those links. Those are public. There are, usually when we're working on a film, there's it's either done through email or a private Facebook site so that we can keep everybody on track. If there's a schedule change, it's a great way to notify everybody. And we can also share some of the pictures from the scenes so you can, oh, wow, that looks better than I thought it did, you know, or see, it worked out great.
I enjoyed watching that short 43 seconds. I'm like looking at that going, wow, how did they actually do that? So now brings me to the fact that they used the drone. How, I would think, as the little tiny bit of acting experience that I have, so forgive me for that, having the drone would be way less invasive than having the cameras like directly on you. Was that easier for you, or did you find it odd that you were being filmed like that with a drone?
Well, personally, my first feeling was, there's Libby and Matt, and they made a film that I was involved in, and here's Todd, and here's a film that he's working on, and these guys are working together. I was just thrilled, first of all, with that collaboration. And secondly, I thought, they're doing the right thing here because it is a beautiful scenic area. They'll get a really nice aerial out of this. And I didn't have to think about where the camera angle was. I didn't have to do anything except keep that kayak going in the right direction. Whereas somebody upstream launched me, and somebody downstream caught me so I wouldn't go beyond a certain point too. So those are the people you don't see. So even though there's a drone in action there, you don't see the other people necessarily who are involved. So that takes some camera work with the drone as well.
Right. Very, very exciting to see some of the new changes that are coming along that are making it a little bit easier too for people who are creating independent films. You have quite an extensive background when it comes to doing acting and film work and all of that. And what I would like to ask you is some questions on like the special effects and the importance of being able to do hands-on special effects and not so much the ones that they use with the computer, you know. Trying to think about
there are certain effects which there are certain effects like makeup and you know, bodily injury sorts of things and piercings and penetrations and all this. I tend to go for the Alfred Hitchcock school of pull back the shower curtain like in Psycho. You see the knife, and then you look down and you hear the screams, and you just see the blood dripping in the bathtub. Like the remake of Evil Dead, for example, and I hate to badmouth a film, but just because you can show all of these special effects, whether they are actual effects or whether they are CG, computer generated, doesn't mean you have to. Just because you have all of these tools available doesn't mean you have to use them all if in the storytelling. I just found it kind of overwhelming and a little, in a sense, boring and offensive that you had to say, oh, I can show this thing going, this I don't need to see all of that. My mind is much more effective at telling me that story if you can give me the clues. Like people believe that in Dawn of the Dead, when I got the top taken off of my head with the helicopter, you know, how close were you to the helicopter blades? Well, I was under the helicopter blades, but it was, you know, that part was cut in later. Right. That was done later. But I said, when you see the movement, your mind is putting the story together, that there's a rotating helicopter blade, this guy is tall, he's climbing up on boxes, he's going under the blades, the music is building, the sound effect is there, your mind is filling in the gaps. And even though it is a good practical effect, your mind is not worried about whether that helicopter blade is real or not. Your focus is somewhere else.
Right. I enjoy practical effects way more than CG, even though they can do a lot of really cool things with it, but the effort that it takes to be able to do the effect and make it actually look the way that it's supposed to and have the reaction of the people as they're seeing it for the first time, it makes an impact not only on what they're visualizing, but it also makes an impact on their mental and psychological state, because you're in that experience and you have these people that are around you having this same experience, but you're all taking out also something different from it too. Particular things may affect you in a different way than somebody else. Like we were talking earlier on, you could have 6 people in a room and they all see it a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. That, I think, yeah, I think that is what is being taken away from people who are just being basically spoon-fed this CG stuff. Do you think that there's going to get to a point where they start to rebel, that the masses start to rebel against all of the CG and have a more direct interest in how they used to do things, as in practical effect?
Well, the only way people rebel really is by not taking out that $5 or $10 to buy a ticket. If they hear from their friends it's just crummy, well, some people will still go to see something for themselves. There are a lot of excellent films that have gotten very bad reviews. And that doesn't mean that you would not like it. It just means that whoever reviewed it, whether they were having a bad day or saw something in it that they didn't like, it might have a completely different meaning for you. And if somebody says, gee, the effects in there are so cheesy, well, maybe you work on effects. Maybe you want to see everything that's being done in effects because you're studying how things are done. Whether it's cheesy, whether it's practical, whether it's CG. I'll go back to Baloo, this little 20-minute short again. We have a shootout with the police at the very beginning. And there's no fire or flame coming out of the guns. So we're able to shoot it, and we're able to move on to do the next things. The body going off the second floor balcony, not to tell you how things go in there, but the body going off the second floor balcony. Combination of my actually slipping on a slippery surface and a dummy being thrown over the end of the balcony. Okay, no spoilers or anything there. But the director was able to put those things together and kind of seamlessly, even though we shot them a couple days apart. So a lot of things come together. As I don't think effects themselves, if they're done well and toned down and fit in, sometimes I have more of a problem with verbal parts of the film, speech, whether or not the people can actually be heard, whether their lines are important, whether they can even be understood.
Sound, okay? Number uno thing that really, really makes indie film look extremely indie is not having the correct pitch, not having the correct soundtrack, or not having the right kind of equipment to be able to get what you need for the expression of whatever the heck is happening on the film. Talk a little bit about some of the things that maybe people might be able to do a little bit better to be able to improve that.
There are some things you can do in post-production. So many things are always left in post-production. Well, we'll fix that in post. We'll fix that in post. But oftentimes they're looking at the visual aspect rather than the auditory aspect. And you really have to have somebody with a good ear who can match that up. There are some ways you can adjust the sound. Maybe, oh, gee, the sound is terrible. She did a terrible job delivering that line. I can crank up the music.
Or put in crickets. Chirp, chirp.
So yeah, it's kind of like wallpaper. You know, there's a wall of sound covering over the things that should have been plot, should have been story development. If it's a good film, in my mind, every element is important, and it needs to be audible, visible, and perceivable in that it advances the storyline. If it doesn't, why is it in there? Is it just throwaway lines? Oh, I don't know. Let's run up the roof. No, let's not run up to the roof. Well, why? If it doesn't make any difference, why have it in there? If you're just trying to fill time and stretch out a film, that's not movie making. I think a good, tight script is wonderful, but I think what people bring to a script is just as important. How they interpret the lines, how they work together, how the director communicates his vision. Working on Host of Sparrows, I love working with Kevin Boone, the director. I worked with him in another film called Ghosting 2 years ago. And I read this character that I have, and I thought, wow, there's so many different ways I could go with him. And so I went, da 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 da. Kevin goes, Jim, that's great, but here's what I want you to do for this scene. And I got it. I knew exactly what he was going for, because he knew what he was going for. It wasn't, I'm running the camera, you guys just go ahead and act and do your lines and stuff.
I've seen that before. It's kind of like, are you kidding me? Or I've seen they'll have a script and they'll have a red pen and or whatever, and they'll be rewriting the script as they film it. Because
yeah.
No, it doesn't work, and it tends to tick off the people that are actually showing up. And the other part of it is that most of the time these people do not get paid. They sometimes don't even get fed, which I highly recommend. At least have cheese, crackers, pop, something, water, of course. But a lot of times there's not even that going on, and you get to a certain point where you're like, this is just purely ridiculous. I'm leaving. And I've seen like 20, 30 people just walk away because somebody couldn't get the idea that you don't do all of that stuff. That's not what these people are there for. They're showing up for your project. You better do something to help them produce something that is going to look cohesive and is going to be something that they're going to be happy with after it's done.
You're absolutely correct, Jackie. That's spot on. Sometimes people don't think ahead and think, well, we're only going to shoot a couple hours. Those couple hours turn into 10 or 12 hours. And if no food has been provided, energy levels start to sag. People get grumbly. Their attitude changes. Working with somebody like Todd Chamberlain, who says, all right, we're taking a break here in 2 hours. We're going to have lunch. Want everybody take some time, go over things. Get very hydrated, make your phone calls, whatever you need to do. And then we're going to get right back on it here at 1 o'clock. You think, somebody's looking after you.
Right.
They care enough. They thought ahead to know that, gee, you're going to be hungry in 4 hours. Or you might be thirsty in the meantime. Or here's a snack or something. Those are small things. But it's amazing how many people think of themselves as directors and think, I am a director. That's not my job. Well, you don't have anybody to work with. You don't have a job.
You have this cute little project, but nobody's going to want to do it. And then the other part of it is I've seen people reject projects because a particular name is associated with it, and they're like, "Oh, I've heard about that person, or I was on that project, and there's no way I'm going to go anywhere near whoever that is if that person is on this project." And they could be just standing there handing out water, but if that name is attached to that project, they're like, not going to do it.
Yeah.
All right,
yeah,
so
word does get around. Yeah, for people who are not taking care of their people, or whose projects run over time-wise, or less than considerate. And at the same time, there are people whose vision is so strong, who are so passionate about what they're doing. You will sacrifice your hunger and your thirst and getting muddy and running through the woods at 4 a.m. in the morning and worrying about ticks and snakes and wild skunks and everything else.
All right, so we have talked about a number of projects that you have been a part of. Is there anything that you wanted to make sure that people knew you were a part of before we wrap this up? So because I know that you probably are starting to get a little uncomfortable with your knee.
Oh, I love all the projects I've worked on. Deadlands 2, Trapped is one that I was involved with. I got to play the evil government official. I guess it's a tribute when people who are your friends come and see a film and then say, I didn't know you were that evil. You think, great, it worked. But of course, regardless of anything else I've ever done, Dawn of the Dead has always had a special place in my life. It's the reason for the last, 15 years or so that I've been doing conventions literally all over the world, Germany and the UK and all over the US.
Talk about UK, because you're going to be going to that, I think, or did you come back from that?
Well, I've been there the last 2 years. They asked me if I wanted to come back this year. There's a group of fans in the UK who are die-hard George Romero film fans. Dawn of the Dead particularly was their favorite film. And they knew that they would not be able, as a group, to afford to come to the US, travel around, meet the various guests and so forth. So they decided, what if we had a small gathering or convention in the UK? And so 2 years ago, they said, well, Dave Crawford, who was in Dawn of the Dead, he's in Germany. Maybe he could come over. It wouldn't be that much more expensive. And I talked to these folks, and the more I talked to them, I realized just how passionate they were and how devoted and dedicated they were to the idea of the film, the cast, George Romero. I said, look, I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to come over. And I don't know what I'll do once I get there. And they said, well, when you get here, we'll pick you up, we'll take care of you, we'll feed you, all this other good stuff, and we'll have a great show. So I got my own plane ticket, and I flew over to help them out with the show. And there were just the two of us. But the promoters, the guys, the volunteers who had set this up, and it was a nightclub, only 75 people could come. That was the capacity. And in one afternoon, I made enough in sales of autographs and so forth to take care of my plane fare. So that was evidence of the passion that these folks had. But they were appreciative that I had come over on my own just to help them and meet them. And so the next year, I said, well, I'm glad we were able to get you started and get a little bit of a fund together to start bringing some guests over. And the person in charge said, Jim, you're coming over too. And I said, well, no, I was just over. And they said, no, one of the fans is going to take care of your flight and your hotel. And I said, are you kidding me? They said, no, they really liked, what you brought to it. And it's like you're a part of this show. And I can't tell you how that touched me. It's just how precious that is to me. And we still talk on a regular basis. And the folks have turned from fans to friends. We're in communication about everything from gardening to, I see you just went to Northern Ireland and did this over there, or you're in Scotland now. So it's just fantastic, the circle of friends that develops from the shared passion and the shared respect and mutual admiration for everything.
It's cool. All right. Anything else that you would like to let people know about?
Well, I want to thank you for what you're doing, Jackie, bringing folks like me out to talk to people and literally kind of raising the awareness of what filmmaking is, what acting is like, kind of a peek behind the horror mask. Because I think that combination of filmmaking, it's something that people delight in, but it's still a mystery. And it's a huge attraction. And people say, how can I get into a zombie movie? I want to be a zombie in a movie. And I said, well, why don't you audition? Find out where movies are being made. That doesn't mean you go to Hollywood. You could go to the town next door and somebody is probably making a film, an independent film. Well, will I get paid? Is that what you want to do?
Then you better go to school and you better learn how to do it all professional, all like that, if that's your sole intent, right?
Yeah. If the money means more than the job will never mean more money. Let your passion drive you. If you want to be in film, you're going to put everything else to the side. You're going to make way for it. You're going to make room in your life to cut out those weekends or those weeknights or those nights running through the middle of the woods carrying a clipboard or whatever it might be, or being hit with an axe or whatever it takes. You'll do it if that's your passion.
That's right. All right. So what I want to do now is give you a few minutes to announce your social media and anything that maybe you might be upcoming as far as people being able to get face to face with you and listen to what your experiences have been.
Okay, well, thank you. I do have a website, www.helizombie, HELIZOMBIE, as in helicopter zombie, but Helizombie. And if you look up helicopter zombie, I should probably come up on your Google search. Folks can also find me on Facebook. I'm there. I try to be responsive, although I'm not in front of the keyboard or in front of the camera all the time. Last year, I did maybe 9 different appearances in various places, including the UK. And this year, I wanted to slow it down a little bit for a couple reasons. I knew I had some films to be worked on, and got 3 of those wrapped up at this point. I have a couple other ones lining up, and maybe another convention or 2. But I'm taking it a little easier right now. I did have a knee replacement. That surgery takes a while. I'm still in physical therapy for that. And I needed a little personal time too. So it's kind of a transitional year, and I'll probably be doing more conventions next year. Maybe you'll see me in the movies, hey?
Hey, you never know. All right. Well, I appreciate your time with us, and I'm very excited that we didn't have any kind of issues or anything like that with getting you on. As a matter of fact, I was shocked when you came on, because I was like, I'm used to people having a little bit of a fuss before they actually get on. When I saw your face, I was like, oh my God, he's here. Fix stuff. Boom. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much for being on. And
it's a delight, Jackie. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night now.
Bye-bye. Woohoo.